To you both. Shola, to you first. Let's look at the numbers. Daily cases highest since April, predictions of 180,000 deaths. Would you know that when you look at the presidential rallies taking place?
Well, I think you would, most definitely. If you think about the fact that, think about the fact that there are 2.42 million confirmed COVID cases in the United States and 124,000. Trump's Tulsa rally was a failure. It definitely did not come up to any of the numbers he thought it would. Not only was it irresponsible, it was potentially a super spreader of COVID-19. And bear in mind that this is a president that has instructed his officials to slow down testing. And now his administration is stopping the funding of coronavirus testing by the end of the month. So you know that his COVID strategy is not only idiotic and suicidal, but it's definitely mass murder. But this is not the only thing Trump has been up to. Bear in mind that he's been weaponizing the racial divide, as usual, as his meal ticket for 4 more years in the White House. He's tweeting inflammatory videos, basically comparing the acts of a few black men to the systemic racism of police brutality against black people for centuries. It's a false equivalence, using racially charged rhetoric in order to promote racial stereotypes. He continues to undermine the voter, mail by voting, which is voter suppression. Yeah. That's systemic racism. And of course, under the guise...
Let's bring Scotty in on that. Some very strong accusations there, Scotty. Let's start then with the language used by the president, calling coronavirus Kung Flu. It is a racist trope, isn't it? And in a country that is battling with systemic racism right now, is it really right that the president should be using that language?
Well, I think it's very sad that the president has had to retort to such an echo chamber as he did this week in Arizona. But what else would you expect after you had large-scale corruption by the Democrats? They not only admit, but you have people like AOC going and bragging about how they basically corrupted the system when it came to his rally that he had in Oklahoma. And because of that,
the words, though, did he? And he used that phrase "Kung Flu" 3 times.
Well, but that is the meat and the potatoes. I mean, unfortunately, this did come from China, and you have to call it for what it is. Now, the question is the president going to put the right policy and legislation to back up his rhetoric on the campaign trail to actually make sure this doesn't happen again? And that wherever this came from in China, whatever the reason, whether it was from a lab or from a bat, that it is actually found out, the truth is told, and the next time when there is a virus like this that starts in a country, that they are open and honest with the entire world. So the entire world is not taken, held captive like what we saw with the coronavirus over the past few months. But, to the president's conversation, the words that he's using, guess what? Nothing new. I'm one of those people that say I don't necessarily like the choice of words, but you have to understand you cannot compare what the president is saying compared to the absolute hatred and the corruption that is being screamed about and promoted about by those on the left, or more importantly, the silence by those in leadership when you have violence happening in the streets of America right now on innocent people that have nothing to do with it, and the attacks that are going on those sorts of people. So, the Democrat and the Republican leadership to a certain extent should be held accountable right now for their silence and not doing anything to try to make a peace in the situation and trying to bring people together. Rather, both sides are kind of basically being opportunists and profiting off this divide that's being continued. But to blame it on one side, that just shows how partial you really are.
All right. I think that it's very convenient. It's incredibly convenient to blame other people for the acts of the president of the United States. And someone like the president's meant to lead by example. As I said, inflammatory videos, using racially, charged words.
They're true videos. They're true videos. They do happen. You have to admit they happen.
Into his base, because they were all cheering. They wanted all of those racially charged words. He knows that that is what some people want. It doesn't make it right. At the end of the day, Donald Trump has to lead by example. And please bear in mind, there is no equivalence to having poor leadership. There's no equivalent to having a leader that does not care about the health of his own people, to having a leader that says that the cure to COVID-19 is to stop testing. This is mass murder, and we need to focus on that. We need to focus on how this president continually puts the lives of Americans at risk. It is mass murder. That is the point. And it is time
I'm
for
so glad you care about American lives right now.
It is time
Well,
for
that's the thing.
Donald
I'm so glad
Trump to be
she's
held
talking about
accountable.
mass
Ladies, we can't hear you if you're shouting over each other. Scotty, you come in there. On this subject of testing, the president talked about slowing down testing so that case numbers go down. His spokesperson said he was joking. The president then said, "I don't kid." What is happening with testing?
Well, that's the thing. There is more testing going on. I took my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, for a physical last week at her pediatrician with no symptoms, nothing, and they offered a part of her physical to give her a COVID test. Of course, it's becoming very rampant. They're setting up in church parking lots giving COVID tests. I understand we need to know the accuracy of how big it is. At the same time, there is rampant testing that is going on right now. So you are going to get more numbers. But what I find interesting is that we're not talking about the actual death toll, because the death toll is not rising. This is still a virus. It is a very real virus that the world's having to deal with. But just like your former official told, he said, it's something we're going to have to live with. And so we cannot shut back down our economy. And those cities that are continuing to keep their economy shut down, except conveniently for protest and riot and looting, you're seeing those cities right now suffering the economic debilitation and begging for taxpayer dollars to bail them out. Money that right now the United States doesn't have.
Shola.
The economy is not more important than the lives of people. The people are the economy. You can't have an economy without the people to build the economy. And stopping testing.
Well, that's the high suicide rate in America, right?
It's wrong. I mean, look, Scotty, I agree with you that we're going to have to live with coronavirus for a long time in trying to deal with it. But the solution to that is not stop funding testing. The solution to that is not stopping or slowing down the testing. The solution is continue with testing and tracing. And that's not what this president wants to do. He wants to act as though this pandemic is over. It is not. Even, his own close scientists have said that it's going to go on. It's an increase, and we're dealing with an increase, and the number of death tolls is increasing in America, the highest in the world. So it is
Scotty, we're running out of time. Scotty, a final thought from you.
Well, it's a double standard. Do we want to have people in the streets protesting and large crowds smashed together? Or do we actually say, you know what, everybody stay at home, find other ways instead of trying to spread this, socially distance yourself? It's a double standard going and double speak going out of Democrats' mouths right now on handling this virus. They have to decide, is it real or is it not? Are they going to take it seriously and try to lessen it? Or are they going to encourage these protests in the name of politics?
Okay.
Their decision.
Scotty Nell Hughes, Shola Balshogbamimu, thank you both very much indeed. We'll see you again next week.